They say Fenris Stormhall's heart was forged in ice and grief. 7 brutal years. And not a single soul, not the warriors who served him, not the enemies who begged at his feet, not even the healers who tended his battle scars, had seen the Alpha King crack a smile. After Victor Hawthorne's assassins slaughtered his entire bloodline in the Massacre of the Blood Moon, the most feared Alpha in the Northern Lands had forgotten what joy felt like. Then came the night that shattered everything. Through the storm-ravaged forests of the Forbidden Territory, a beautiful she-wolf in a torn and blood-stained wedding dress ran barefoot like death itself was snapping at her heels. Fleeing a forced mating, escaping a cage wrapped in ceremony and false promises, she burst through the iron gates of Stormhall Keep, wild-eyed and feral, a silver dagger trembling in her mud-caked hands. She didn't beg. She didn't weep. She stared Fenris dead in the eye and said, "Grant me sanctuary, or I swear to the moon goddess I'll expose every weakness in your northern border to the enemy who's hunting me." And for the first time in 7 years, Fenris Stormhall smiled. That was the moment everything ignited. The thunderstorm raged over the northern lands with primal fury, turning the ancient pine forests into a maze of shadows and howling wind. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars, illuminating the massive stone fortress that sat like a sleeping beast among the mountains. Stormhall Keep. Brutal, unforgiving, and ruled by the coldest wolf alive. Freya Silverpaw had exactly 3 minutes before they tore her apart. Her bare feet pounded against rain-slicked stones and fallen pine needles. The wedding dress, thousands of silver coins worth of cream silk, and her mother's dying wish now hung in shredded ribbons, soaked with rain and splattered with blood. Not her blood. The guard who'd tried to stop her at the border. Her lungs burned like someone had poured molten silver down her throat. Behind her, the howls rose. Hungry. Vicious. Victor Hawthorne's trackers. Victor didn't forgive humiliation. And running from your own mating ceremony in front of the entire Southern Shadow Pack? That wasn't just humiliation. That was a declaration of war. Freya's fingers tightened around the ceremonial dagger she'd stolen from the altar. She'd never killed anyone before tonight, but instinct was a powerful teacher. The blade was still warm. The border gate to Stormhall territory loomed ahead, massive iron forged with wolf sigils, wrapped in thorned vines and ancient warning runes. Beyond it lay certain death. Everyone knew the legends. The Ice King showed no mercy to trespassers, especially not wolves bearing the scent of his greatest enemy. But Freya had studied the maps in Victor's war room when he thought she was just a pretty ornament. She'd memorized every treaty, every weak point, every secret alliance. And she knew one crucial truth. Fenris Stormhall hated Victor Hawthorne more than he hated anything else in this world. Freya made her choice. She slammed into the gate with her full weight, and the moment her skin touched the iron, alarms shrieked through the keep. Ancient magic. A trap for fools. The gate groaned open, and suddenly she was stumbling into a torchlit courtyard that looked like it had been carved from nightmare and stone. And there he stood. Fenris Stormhall. She'd heard the whispered stories around Victor's hearth. The ghost wolf. The Ice King. The alpha who'd watched his parents, his siblings, his entire pack council butchered in a single night, and who'd spent 7 years hunting down every last assassin with methodical, emotionless precision. The male who consolidated 4 rival northern packs under one iron fist. The warlord who made mercy look like weakness. But the stories hadn't prepared her for this. He stood beside a massive black warhorse, one gloved hand resting on the beast's muscled neck. 6'5" of pure predatory power wrapped in dark leather armor studded with silver and wolf bone. His beard was thick and braided in the ancient northern style, his hair shaved at the sides with the top pulled back in warrior knots. Scars traced his exposed forearms like a roadmap of violence survived. And his face. Ancestors help her, his face was brutal beauty incarnated. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass. A jaw carved from granite. eyes the color of winter storms, pale gray and absolutely merciless. There was something so utterly controlled about his stillness that every other wolf in the courtyard looked like they were vibrating with barely contained chaos. And he never smiled. The entire realm knew that. Fenris Stormhowl's smile had died with his family. Until now. The moment Freya crashed through that gate, dagger raised, wedding dress destroyed, eyes blazing with the kind of desperation that either breaks a wolf or transforms them into something dangerous, his lips curved. Just slightly. A ghost of dark amusement that made him look less like a statue and more like a predator who'd just found interesting prey. Well, he said, his voice like gravel and smoke, rich with the northern accent. This is unexpected. His warriors moved instantly, forming a semicircle, hands on weapons. But Fenris raised one scarred hand. They froze mid-motion, obedient as trained hounds. Freya's dagger hand shook, but she kept the blade level, pointed at his chest. I need asylum. Those winter storm eyes traveled over her. Not leering. Assessing. Reading her like she was a battle strategy written in flesh and desperation. Runaway bride, he observed, his tone almost conversational. Or runaway prisoner? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. My father sold me to Victor Hawthorne to settle a debt. I'm not livestock to be bartered. Something flickered in those pale eyes. Recognition. Perhaps even respect. Victor Hawthorne. Fenris repeated the name like it tasted of poison and old blood. The Southern Shadow Pack. Arms smuggling. Territory violations. The wolf who sent assassins into my lands 3 winters ago. He tilted his head, studying her with predatory focus. You aim high for your rebellion, little silver wolf. Do you understand where you've run to? Stormhall Keep. Your territory. Freya took 3 steps forward, leaving a trail of rainwater and defiance on his ancient stones. I know exactly who you are, Fenris Stormhall. And I know you despise the Hawthorne Pack because Victor tried to seize your iron mines last year. You killed 5 of his lieutenants and sent their heads back in a chest carved with insults. The courtyard went deathly silent. Even the torches seemed to stop crackling. One of Fenris's warriors, a massive brute with a scar bisecting his face, laughed harshly. Ragnar, he snarled, this bitch has a death wish. Ragnar. Fenris's voice didn't rise in volume, but the temperature plummeted 20 degrees. Speak about her like that again, and I'll remove your tongue with a dull blade and make you swallow it. Ragnar Frostbite stepped back immediately, bowing his head in submission. Fenris's attention returned to Freya, and this time, that almost smile was definitely there. Dangerous. Intrigued. You've done your research. I'm not just some spoiled noble's daughter, Freya said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. I have the moon's memory. Every battle map, every supply route, every secret alliance Victor ever discussed in my presence is locked in here. She tapped her temple. Information that could cripple the Southern Shadow Pack from within. Intelligence that would be valuable to the right alpha. And what do you want in return for these secrets? Protection. A new identity. Passage to the western coast where I can disappear. Her voice didn't waver. Or I can turn around, let Victor's hunters drag me back, and when he tortures the defiance out of me, I'll tell him every defensive weakness in your northern wall, every patrol schedule, every supply shortage. Which option serves us both better, Alpha King? For a long, crystallized moment, Fenris simply stared at her. The warhorse snorted, pawing the ground. Thunder rolled overhead. The world held its breath. Then he did something that made every wolf in his courtyard stiffen in shock. He laughed. Not loud. Not long. Just a brief, genuine sound of dark amusement that transformed his brutal face from coldly beautiful to absolutely devastating. You walked into a wolf's den, he said, that deadly smile widening just a fraction, and threatened the wolf. Either you're the bravest female I've ever encountered, or the most foolish. Can't I be both? That smile grew. Sharp as a blade. I'm beginning to think you might be. Outside the gate, howls erupted. Closer now. Furious. Victor's pack. Freya's grip tightened on her dagger. They're here. Fenris straightened, adjusting his leather vambraces with calm precision. Ragnar. Bjorn. Show Miss Silverpaw to the North Tower. Make certain she's comfortable. His storm gray eyes locked with hers, and she felt the weight of his alpha presence like a physical force. I'll handle your welcoming committee. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why are you helping me? That dangerous smile again. Predatory. Fascinated. Because he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and pine and something wild and masculine. I haven't been this entertained in 7 years. His voice dropped to a rumble that she felt in her bones. And because I want to see what a she-wolf brave enough to threaten an alpha king is truly capable of. Then he walked past her toward the gate, and Freya realized with crystal clarity that she hadn't escaped one cage just to run into another. She'd run straight into the arms of something far more dangerous than Victor Hawthorne could ever be. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The night Freya Silverpaw chose death over captivity began in a chamber of lies. The mating ceremony hall in the Southern Shadow Pack's fortress had been decorated with blood roses and black candles, Victor's idea of romance. 300 wolves had gathered to witness the union, their eyes gleaming with hunger for the spectacle. The Alpha's claimed bride. The Silvano family's precious daughter, finally collared and bred. Freya had stood at that altar in her cream silk gown, hands trembling as the priestess chanted the ancient binding words. Victor Hawthorne stood beside her, his smile predatory, his grip on her wrist tight enough to bruise. He smelled of whiskey and cruelty, and when he leaned close to whisper what he'd do to her after the ceremony, Freya's wolf had snarled so viciously inside her chest that she'd tasted blood. That was when she'd seen it. The ceremonial dagger on the altar. Silver. Sharp. Meant for the blood ritual. The priestess had turned to bless the wine. Victor had released her wrist to accept a goblet. And Freya had made her choice. She'd grabbed the dagger, slashed the nearest guard across the throat, and ran. Now, 2 hours later, her lungs were screaming and her feet were shredded. The fortress corridors had given way to the outer village, then to the forests, and finally to these nightmare-dark woods that separated the Southern Shadow Packlands from the Forbidden Territory. Victor's trackers had been on her scent within minutes. They'd killed 3 villagers who'd tried to help her, leaving their bodies as warnings. Freya crashed through another thicket, thorns shredding what remained of her dress. She could hear them behind her 5, maybe 6 wolves in their hunting forms. Faster than her. Stronger. They were toying with her, letting her run until exhaustion made her easy prey. The rain had started an hour ago, turning the forest floor into treacherous mud. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash of white light, Freya saw it. The bridge. Ancient stones spanning a ravine, marking the border between Victor's lands and the Northern Territory. Beyond it, through the rain and mist, the massive silhouette of Stormhowl Keep rose like a mountain of carved darkness. Cross that bridge and she'd be in Fenris Stormhowl's domain. The Ice King. The Alpha who showed no mercy to trespassers bearing enemy pack scent. Stay on this side and Victor's wolves would drag her back to a fate worse than death. Freya's wolf howled inside her, primal and desperate. Better to die free than live in chains. She ran for the bridge. Behind her, the lead tracker realized what she was doing. No. Stop her. She's crossing into Stormhowl. His words cut off in a gurgling scream as Freya spun and drove her dagger into his eye socket. The wolf collapsed, thrashing. The others skidded to a halt, shocked that their prey had turned predator. Freya didn't wait. She bolted across the bridge, her bare feet slapping against rain-slicked stone. The ancient runes carved into the bridge supports began to glow blue, territorial magic, announcing an intruder. Alarm shrieked through the northern mountains. The moment her feet touched the far side, the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavier, colder, saturated with raw alpha power. This was Fenris Stormhall's domain, and every molecule of it knew. Victor's wolves paced at the bridge's edge, snarling but unwilling to cross. One of them shifted to human form, naked and furious. "You stupid bitch. You're dead anyway. The Ice King doesn't grant asylum." Freya's laugh was half sob, half snarl. "Then I'll die on my own terms." She turned and ran toward the fortress, her torn dress billowing behind her like a war banner. The iron gates loomed ahead, massive and ancient, wrapped in thorned vines and warning sigils. She could see torchlight beyond them, movement, the silhouettes of armed warriors. She slammed into the gates with her full weight, and the moment her skin touched the iron, the screaming intensified. The gates groaned open, pulled by unseen hands, and Freya stumbled through into a courtyard that looked like it had been carved from violence and old stone. Torches blazed in iron brackets along the walls, casting dancing shadows across cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of warrior feet. The keep rose behind the courtyard, all brutal angles and defensive towers. And in the center of it all, surrounded by warriors in dark leather and fur, stood the Alpha King. Fenris Stormhall sat astride a massive black warhorse, one hand resting casually on the beast's neck. Even mounted, his presence filled the courtyard like a physical force. His pale gray eyes, winter storm eyes, fixed on her with predatory focus. Freya's wolf whimpered in recognition. Alpha. Dangerous. Powerful beyond measure. The warriors formed a semicircle around her, weapons half drawn. The largest of them, a brute with a scar cleaving his face in two, growled low in his throat. "She reeks of Hawthorn Pack." "I can smell it, Ragnar," Fenris said, his voice like gravel and smoke. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with barely a sound. 6'5" of lethal grace wrapped in studded leather armor. "The question is whether she's spy or refugee." Freya's hand tightened on her dagger. She was trembling from cold, from terror, from exhaustion, but she forced herself to stand tall. She'd come too far to grovel now. "I'm no spy," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I'm Freya Silverpaw, daughter of grim Hard Silvano. And I'm offering you a trade." Fenris's eyebrow arched. Up close, he was even more devastating than the legend suggested. His beard was thick and braided in intricate northern patterns, his hair shaved at the sides with the top pulled back in warrior knots. Scars traced his exposed forearms like a roadmap of survived violence. And his face, brutal, beautiful, utterly controlled, showed nothing but cold assessment. "You're in no position to negotiate," he observed. "You're a trespasser on sacred ground, wearing enemy colors, armed in my courtyard. I could have you executed where you stand." "You could," Freya agreed. "But you won't." Arrogant. But there was a flicker of amusement in those winter eyes. "What makes you so certain?" "Because I have something you want." Freya took 3 steps forward, leaving a trail of rainwater and blood on his ancient stones. "I have the complete layout of Victor Hawthorne's fortress, including his vault. I know his supply routes, his ally agreements, his patrol schedules. I know which of his generals are loyal and which ones can be bought. I spent 6 months as his unwilling bride-to-be, and I used every moment to memorize everything I could." She tapped her temple. "The moon's memory. I forget nothing." The courtyard had gone silent except for the crackling torches and the distant rumble of thunder. Ragnar Frostbite exchanged glances with another warrior, a lean male with frost-white hair. Fenris studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped closer, close enough that Freya could smell leather and pine and something wild and masculine. He was massive up close, radiating power that made her wolf want to bare her throat in submission. "Let's say I believe you," he said softly, dangerously. "What exactly are you asking for in return?" "Asylum. Protection from Victor's reclamation attempts." Freya met his gaze, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed at her to submit to the superior alpha. And when this warrior planning against him is over, safe passage to wherever I choose to go. War. Fenris's lips curved slightly. You assume much. I assume nothing. I read the intelligence reports Victor kept. You've been systematically destabilizing his southern alliances for 2 years. You're not trying to contain him. You're preparing to destroy him. She paused. And I want to help you do it. Something shifted in Fenris's expression. Respect, perhaps. Or intrigue. Why? Because he killed my mother when she tried to stop the mating arrangement. Because my father sold me like cattle to pay a gambling debt. Because Victor Hawthorne promised to breed me until I gave him sons, and if I failed, he'd give me to his generals as a reward. Her voice dropped to a snarl. Because I would rather die than be any male's property. Fenris stared at her for another long moment. Then he turned to his warriors. Ragnar, take a squad to the border. Make it clear to Hawthorne's dogs that they're not welcome on my lands. And the girl? Ragnar asked, his tone skeptical. The girl, Fenris said, is under King's protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Freya's knees nearly buckled with relief. But Fenris wasn't done. He turned back to her, and his expression was cold as winter. You have 1 moon cycle to prove your value. If your information is accurate and useful, I'll grant you asylum. If you're lying, or if you're a spy, I'll tie you to the border markers and let Victor's wolves tear you apart slowly. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Do we understand each other, little silver wolf? Freya's wolf trembled, but she held his gaze. Perfectly, Alpha King. Good. He gestured to a female warrior with battle scars across her shoulders. Astrid, take Miss Silverpaw to the North Tower. Get her cleaned up, fed, and under guard. She doesn't leave the keep without my permission. As Astrid moved forward, a commotion erupted at the gates. The wolves stationed there shifted nervously, and one called out, My king. There's an envoy at the border. Southern Shadow Pack. They demand audience. Fenris's expression went glacial. Let them in. But only the envoy. His guards stay outside our walls. Minutes later, a wolf in human form strode into the courtyard, flanked by Ragnar and 3 northern warriors. He was tall, dark-haired, with Victor's pack sigil branded into his shoulder. His eyes found Freya, and his lip curled in disgust. Alpha Stormhowl, he said, his voice formal but edged with threat. I am Marcus Grey Fong, 2nd of the Southern Shadow Pack. I come bearing a message from Alpha Victor Hawthorne. Fenris stood perfectly still, radiating the kind of controlled violence that made even his own warriors take a step back. Speak. Marcus's eyes flicked to Freya again, lingering with obvious contempt. Alpha Hawthorne demands the return of his stolen property. The female, Freya Silverpaw, was bound to him in ceremony before witnesses. She belongs to the Southern Shadow Pack by law and tradition. Stolen property, Fenris repeated, his voice deceptively soft. Interesting choice of words. She murdered one of our guards during her escape. She's a criminal. She's under King's protection. Fenris's words cut through the courtyard like a blade. And in my lands, we don't treat females as property to be bartered and reclaimed. Your alpha's claim means nothing here. Marcus's jaw tightened. With respect, Alpha Stormhowl, this could be seen as an act of aggression. Alpha Hawthorne was very clear. Return the girl, or there will be consequences. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop 10 degrees. Fenris took 3 slow steps toward Marcus, and even though the envoy was a large male, he looked suddenly small compared to the Ice King. Consequences, Fenris said quietly, dangerously. Your alpha sends threats into my territory? Tell Victor Hawthorne this. The female stays. If he has a problem with that, he's welcome to come discuss it personally. I'd enjoy the conversation. Marcus's face went pale. Everyone in the realm knew what happened to wolves who discussed things with Fenris Stormhowl. Most of them ended up as warnings nailed to trees. The alpha won't accept this, Marcus said, trying to maintain his composure. She was promised to him. Her father. Her father, Freya interrupted, her voice sharp as glass, sold her to settle a debt. That doesn't make me anyone's possession. Marcus sneered at her. You think you're safe here, little Omega? Victor will burn this entire keep to ash to get you back. Not because he loves you, because you humiliated him. You made him look weak in front of the packs. He'll never stop hunting you. Then he can try, Fenris said, his tone final. And he can fail. Now get out of my territory before I forget the laws of envoy protection. Marcus held his ground for one more moment, then turned sharply on his heel. You're making a mistake, Stormhowl. This insult won't be forgotten. Neither will yours, Fenris replied. Ragnar, escort our guest to the border. Make sure he understands that any Southern Shadow Pack wolf who crosses into my lands without permission will be considered an act of war. As Ragnar and his warriors led Marcus away, the tension in the courtyard remained thick enough to choke on. Freya's legs were trembling, exhaustion finally catching up to her adrenaline. She'd burned through every reserve she had just staying upright. Fenris turned to her, his expression unreadable. You heard him. Victor won't stop. He'll send assassins, mercenaries, whatever it takes. Protecting you will cost me blood. I know, Freya said quietly. But I also know you want Victor destroyed. I can give you the tools to do it. Those winter storm eyes studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Astrid, take her. And post guards on her door. I want to know everyone who comes and goes. The female warrior stepped forward, her scarred face stern but not unkind. Come on, princess. Let's get you out of those rags. Freya followed Astrid into the keep, through corridors lit by torches and lined with weapons. The stone walls were ancient, carved with runes and pack history. They climbed a spiral staircase to the north tower, where Astrid pushed open a heavy wooden door. The chamber beyond was spartanly furnished but clean. A bed with furs, a fireplace already crackling with warmth, a basin of water, and a small wardrobe. Through the narrow window, Freya could see the northern forests stretching into darkness. Stay here, Astrid ordered. I'll bring food and proper clothing. Don't try to leave. The guards outside aren't decorative. When the door closed, Freya finally allowed herself to collapse. She sank to the floor, her torn dress pooling around her, and for the first time since she'd grabbed that dagger, she let herself shake. She'd escaped. She was alive. But she'd traded one dangerous alpha for another, and she had no idea if she'd just saved herself or damned herself to something worse. 3 days later, Freya stood in the War Council chamber, trying not to let her nerves show. Astrid had brought her new clothing, not the delicate dresses of a noble lady, but practical northern garb. Leather breeches, a tunic of soft wool, and a fur-lined vest. They'd also given her boots, thank the moon goddess, though Freya had insisted on keeping the ceremonial dagger. She wore it now, strapped to her thigh beneath the tunic, a small comfort in this fortress of strangers. The council chamber was massive, with a long table carved from a single ancient tree. Maps covered every surface, held down by daggers and stones. Fenris stood at the head of the table, his warriors arranged around him. Ragnar Frostbite. Bjorn Ironclaw, the frost-haired male she'd seen in the courtyard. Astrid. A grizzled older wolf named Thrain who looked like he'd survived 100 battles. And others, all of them radiating power and suspicion. They all turned to stare when Astrid led Freya in. This is your great informant? Ragnar said, his tone dripping skepticism. A runaway bride? This is Freya Silverpaw, Fenris corrected, his voice carrying authority. And before you dismiss her, you'll hear what she has to say. He gestured to the maps spread across the table. They showed the territories between the northern lands and the southern Shadow Pact domains, with notations about patrol routes, supply lines, and defensive positions. We've been planning a strike on Holthorn's northern outpost, Fenris continued. 3 supply caravans pass through there each week. If we can seize them, we cripple his ability to arm his border forces. Freya stepped closer to the table, studying the map. Her enhanced memory clicked into place, comparing what she saw with what she'd memorized from Victor's war room. And immediately, she spotted the flaw. "You're planning to attack from the east," she said, tracing the marked route. "Through the Pine Pass." "Correct," Thrain said gruffly. "It's the most direct route, and the terrain provides cover until we're within striking distance." Freya shook her head. "It's a trap. Victor fortified that pass 6 weeks ago after he got intelligence that you were scouting it. He's got 40 wolves hidden in reinforced positions in the rocks above the path. You attack from there, and you'll be slaughtered before you even see the outpost." The room went silent. Ragnar's expression darkened. "How would you know that?" "Because I was there when he gave the orders. I was sitting in his solar, pretending to embroider like a good little mate while he and his generals planned how to bait the Ice King into a kill zone." She pointed to a different route on the map. "But he left the western approach vulnerable because the terrain is harsher. He doesn't think you'd risk it. That's your way in." Fenris leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "The western approach goes through the Widow's Canyon. It's treacherous even in good weather, and it's twice as long. But it's undefended," Freya countered. "And Victor's supply trains don't vary their routes. They pass through the outpost at dawn every third day. If you take the western route and time it right, you can hit them before they even know you're there." Bjorn studied the map, then looked at Fenris. "She's either telling the truth or leading us into a worse trap." "I'm telling the truth," Freya said firmly. "But don't take my word for it. Send scouts to the Pine Pass. They'll see the fortifications. Then you'll know I'm not lying." Fenris studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Bjorn. "Take 3 of your best. Scout the Pine Pass. I want confirmation before dawn." As Bjorn nodded and left, Ragnar crossed his arms, still glaring at Freya. "Even if she's right about this, it doesn't mean we can trust her. She could be feeding us truth now to make us swallow lies later." "She could," Fenris agreed. "Which is why she'll be coming with us." Freya's head snapped up. "What? You claim you know Victor's tactics. Prove it. You'll accompany me on the next patrol." His eyes held hers, challenging. "Consider it a test of your stamina. If you can keep up with northern wolves, maybe you're worth protecting. If you can't," he shrugged, "then you're just another liability." Astrid looked uncomfortable. "My king, she's untrained for combat." "Then she'll learn quickly," Fenris said, his tone final. "We leave at first light." Dismissed. The warriors filed out, leaving Freya alone with the Alpha King. He stood at the window, looking out over his lands, his profile sharp against the firelight. "You don't trust me," Freya said quietly. "I don't trust anyone," Fenris replied without looking at her. "Trust gets you killed. Betrayed. Destroyed." He finally turned, and his winter eyes were cold. "You want asylum? You'll earn it. Blood and sweat and proof. Nothing is free in the north, little wolf." Freya lifted her chin. "I didn't come here expecting things to be easy. I came here to survive. Then you'll need to be stronger than you've ever been." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The dagger you carry. Do you know how to use it?" "I killed a man with it 3 days ago." Killing one guard in a moment of panic isn't the same as fighting trained warriors. He considered her. "Astrid will begin training you tonight. If you're going to survive in this world, you need to be more than just information wrapped in skin." He left before she could respond, and Freya stood alone in the war room, staring at the maps that would determine whether she lived or died. The patrol left at dawn, just as Fenris had promised. Freya had barely slept. Astrid had spent half the night teaching her basic defensive stances and how to properly grip a blade. Her muscles ached, and the cuts on her feet from her escape had barely healed. But she forced herself to mount the gray mare they'd provided, refusing to show weakness. Fenris rode at the head of the group on his massive black warhorse, with Ragnar and 4 other warriors flanking him. They'd given Freya a bow and a quiver of arrows, though she suspected they didn't expect her to be any good with them. They were wrong. Her mother had taught her archery when she was young, before Victor had entered their lives. before everything had turned dark. Freya had spent countless hours in the forests of her childhood home, learning to track, to shoot, to move silently. It was one of the few skills she'd hidden from Victor, instinctively knowing that appearing helpless made her less threatening. Now, as they rode through the northern forests, Freya felt that old muscle memory awakening. The weight of the bough across her back was familiar, comforting even. They'd been riding for 3 hours when Fenris called a halt near a frozen lake. The surface was like black glass, reflecting the gray sky above. Pine trees surrounded them, their branches heavy with snow. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, much like the wolf who ruled these lands. "We'll rest here," Fenris announced, dismounting. "Water the horses. Stay alert." Ragnar shot Freya a look that clearly said he expected her to be exhausted and complaining. Instead, she dismounted smoothly, ignoring the ache in her thighs, and led her mare to the lake's edge. "You ride well," Astrid observed, coming to stand beside her. "For a southern noble." "My mother believed ladies should know how to escape if necessary," Freya replied, the old pain of that loss flickering through her. She was right. Astrid's scarred face softened slightly. "Smart female. Your mother." Before Freya could respond, one of the warriors, a young male named Eric, called out from the tree line. "Movement. North side." Every wolf went instantly alert, hands moving to weapons. Fenris's expression shifted from neutral to predatory in a heartbeat. "How many?" "Can't tell. The trees are 2. The attack came fast and brutal. 6 wolves burst from the forest, already shifted into their beast forms, massive creatures of fur and fang and rage. Rogue wolves, Freya realized with horror. Their eyes were wild, their movements uncoordinated but vicious. Probably exiles who'd banded together, desperate and dangerous. Fenris shifted instantly, his human form exploding into a creature of nightmare and power. His wolf was enormous, silver-gray with winter-white markings, and when he howled, the very air seemed to tremble. Ragnar and the others shifted too, meeting the rogues in a clash of teeth and claws. The frozen lake echoed with snarls and the wet sound of tearing flesh. Freya's mare screamed and reared. She barely managed to roll away before the horse bolted. Another wolf lunged for her, a scarred brown beast with foam at its mouth. She grabbed for her dagger, but the rogue was too fast. Then an arrow sprouted from its eye. The rogue collapsed, twitching. Freya spun to see who'd made the shot, but there was no one behind her. The bow was still in her own hands, the strings still vibrating. She'd made the shot. Pure instinct and muscle memory. No time to process it. 2 more rogues were circling, trying to flank Fenris. He was magnificent in battle, all controlled fury and lethal precision, but he couldn't watch every angle. One of the rogues was creeping through the shadows of the trees, positioning for an attack on his blind side. Freya's hands moved without thought. Knock. Draw. Breathe. Release. The arrow flew true, slamming into the rogue's shoulder just as it prepared to leap. The creature yelped and stumbled, giving Fenris the split second he needed to spin and crush its throat with his massive jaws. The remaining rogues realized they were outmatched and tried to flee. Ragnar and Bjorn ran 2 of them down. The last one made it to the tree line before Astrid's thrown axe buried itself in its spine. Silence fell over the frozen lake, broken only by heavy breathing and the drip of blood on snow. Fenris shifted back to human form, his body covered in minor cuts, but otherwise unharmed. His pale eyes found Freya immediately, scanning her for injuries. When he saw she was standing unharmed, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Approval. The kill, Ragnar said, breathing hard as he shifted back to human form. He was staring at the rogue with the arrow through its eye. That was yours. Freya lowered the bow, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Yes, and the one that was flanking the king, Bjorn added, respect creeping into his voice. You saved his flank. Fenris approached her slowly, and Freya fought the urge to step back. He was naked, they all were, their clothes shredded in the shift, but he wore it like armor. There was nothing vulnerable about him. You didn't panic, he observed. Most wolves freeze in their first real ambush. I panicked, Freya admitted. But I shot anyway. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The first real one she'd seen from him that wasn't edged with danger or dark amusement. Where did a noble lady learn to shoot like that? My mother. She said a she-wolf should never depend entirely on others for protection. Freya's voice caught slightly. She died trying to protect me from this marriage. I won't waste what she taught me. Something shifted in Fenris's expression. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition of shared loss. Your mother was wise. Ragnar approached, his earlier skepticism replaced with grudging respect. I owe you my king's life. That rogue would have torn his throat out if you hadn't taken the shot. I didn't do it for honor or debt, Freya said quietly. I did it because if he dies, I die. We're bound by necessity, not loyalty. Fenris tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling winter eyes. Honest. I appreciate that. He turned to his warriors. Gather the bodies. I want to know if these rogues have pack marks. Someone might have sent them. As the warriors moved to obey, Astrid brought Freya a water skin. You did well, princess. Better than well. I'm not a princess, Freya said, taking a long drink. Not anymore. No, Astrid agreed, glancing at the dead rogue with the arrow in its eye. You're something more useful. A survivor. They made camp that night in a small clearing, building a fire against the winter cold. Freya sat slightly apart from the warriors, close enough to the fire to be warm, but separate enough to mark her outsider status. She was cleaning her borrowed bow when Fenris sat down beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. For a male his size, he moved with unnerving silence. You're not eating, he observed. Not hungry. Liar. You're trying not to show weakness. He handed her a strip of dried meat. Eat. You'll need your strength. Freya took it, more because arguing with an alpha king seemed unwise than because she wanted it. But once she started eating, she realized she was starving. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them and the stars cold overhead. Finally, Fenris spoke. Bjorn scouts confirmed your information. The Pine Pass is fortified exactly as you described. 40 wolves positioned in the rocks, waiting to spring a trap. He turned to look at her. You saved a dozen of my warriors' lives today. Maybe more. So I passed your test, Freya said. You exceeded it. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. 7 years ago, Victor Hawthorne hired the assassins who murdered my family. My parents. My younger sister. My twin brother. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Freya could feel the rage beneath it like magma under ice. They came during the blood moon ceremony, when our defenses were down and our pack was celebrating. They killed 63 wolves that night. Women. Children. Elders. Freya's breath caught. I didn't know Victor was behind it. Few do. He covered his tracks well, used intermediaries and cutouts. But I've spent 7 years gathering proof. His eyes met hers, and they were full of cold fire. I'm not just planning to defeat him, Freya. I'm planning to destroy him. Everything he's built. Everyone who helped him. I'm going to burn his empire to ash and salt the earth where it stood. The intensity of his words should have frightened her. Instead, Freya felt something settle in her chest. Purpose, maybe. Or vindication. Good, she said quietly. Then use me. Use everything I know. I want him destroyed just as much as you do. Fenris studied her for a long moment, and something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet. But the beginning of understanding. 2 wolves bound by mutual vengeance and survival. Your moon cycle isn't up yet, he said finally. But you've earned your asylum, little silver wolf. You're under my protection. Permanently. Relief flooded through Freya, so intense it made her dizzy. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Fenris stood, his massive frame blocking out the stars. Victor won't stop trying to reclaim you. And now that you've proven useful to me, he'll want you dead even more. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. You're mine to protect now. That means you're also mine to command. Remember that. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Freya alone by the fire with those words echoing in her mind. You're mine. Not Victor's. Not her father's. Fenris's. She should have been angry at being claimed like property again. But somehow, coming from him, it felt different. Less like ownership and more like. Freya shook her head, banishing the thought. It was too dangerous to think that way. Fenris Stormhowl was using her just as surely as Victor had tried to. The only difference was that she'd chosen this cage. But as she lay down that night, wrapped in her borrowed furs and surrounded by northern wolves, she realized something that both terrified and thrilled her. For the first time in 6 months, she felt almost safe. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. 2 weeks after the frozen lake, winter descended on the northern lands with vengeful fury. Freya had settled into a strange new routine at Stormhowl Keep. Her days were spent in the war room, poring over maps and intelligence reports with Fenris and his council. Her evenings belonged to training with Astrid, learning not just archery, but hand-to-hand combat, knife work, and the brutal efficiency of northern fighting styles. Her nights were restless, filled with dreams of Victor's face and the sound of her mother's dying screams. But she was alive, free, and slowly, grudgingly, the northern wolves were beginning to accept her. Ragnar no longer sneered when she entered a room. Bjorn had started asking her opinion on patrol routes. Even Thrain, the grizzled old warrior who trusted no one, had grunted approvingly when she'd correctly predicted Victor's response to their supply raid. And Fenris. Fenris was a constant, unsettling presence. He watched her during council meetings with those winter storm eyes. He appeared at her training sessions, correcting her stance with impersonal efficiency. He sat across from her at meals, silent but somehow overwhelming, filling every space he occupied. She told herself she wasn't drawn to him, that the flutter in her chest when he entered a room was just residual fear, that the way her wolf perked up at his scent was simple biology, recognizing a powerful alpha, nothing more. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. The blizzard hit on a gray afternoon when Freya and Fenris were returning from a reconnaissance mission to the eastern border. They'd taken only 2 other warriors, Bjorn and a young scout named Lyra, leaving the bulk of the patrol back at the keep. The snow had started as light flurries. Within an hour, it was a white wall that made seeing 3 feet ahead impossible. "We need shelter," Bjorn shouted over the howling wind. "There's a hunting cabin half a mile south." They pushed through the storm, the cold so intense it felt like knives against exposed skin. Freya's fingers were numb, her face burning with frostbite. She could barely feel her legs. Then Fenris was there, his massive arm wrapping around her waist, practically carrying her. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice cutting through the wind. "Don't you dare quit now, little wolf." The cabin appeared like a salvation, a small stone structure half buried in drifts. Bjorn kicked the door open, and they stumbled inside. Lyra immediately began building a fire while Bjorn checked the perimeter. "We'll have to wait it out," Fenris said, shaking snow from his hair. "This storm will last through the night." Freya collapsed onto a rough wooden bench, her whole body shaking. Now that they were out of immediate danger, the adrenaline was fading, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion and cold. "Your hands," Fenris said sharply. He was kneeling in front of her suddenly, pulling off her gloves. Her fingers were white, the tips already showing signs of frostbite. "Ancestors, damn it. Why didn't you say something?" "Didn't want to slow us down," Freya managed through chattering teeth. He cursed in the old northern tongue, words she didn't understand but whose meaning was clear. Then his hands were wrapping around hers, his body heat shocking against her frozen skin. "Bjorn, Lyra, take the back room. Make sure the walls are secure," Fenris ordered. "I'll tend to her." The warriors exchanged glances but obeyed, disappearing through a doorway and closing it behind them. Suddenly, Freya was alone with the Alpha King in the small main room, lit only by the growing fire. Fenris worked methodically, warming her hands between his, then moving to check her feet. She'd pushed too hard during the trek, and the thin northern boots had soaked through. He stripped them off, his jaw tightening when he saw the blisters and raw skin. "You're going to lose toes if we're not careful," he muttered, grabbing supplies from the cabin's emergency cache. He had healing salve, clean cloth for bandages, and a bottle of something that smelled strong enough to strip paint. "I've survived worse," Freya said, trying for bravado. "Have you?" Fenris looked up at her, and his expression was strange. Almost concerned. "You've been in my territory less than a month, and you've been attacked by rogues, nearly frozen to death, and pushed yourself past exhaustion in training. You're trying to prove something. I'm trying to survive. You're trying to earn your place." He began wrapping her feet with surprising gentleness for someone with such large, scarred hands. "You don't have to. I already told you, you have asylum. Permanently." "Words are cheap," Freya said quietly. "Actions earn trust. You taught me that." Fenris was silent for a moment, his focus on the bandages. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "You remind me of her. My sister, Ira." Freya went still. He'd never spoken about his family beyond that one night at the frozen lake. "She was fierce," he continued, his hands still working. "Refused to be treated like a delicate thing just because she was female. She trained with the warriors, argued with my father about pack politics, drove our mother to distraction." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She would have liked you. Probably would have recruited you into whatever scheme she was planning." "How old was she?" Freya asked gently. "When?" 17. "She died defending the younglings in the nursery." His hands stilled, and his voice went flat. "They found her body surrounded by 5 dead assassins. She took them all with her before they could reach the children." Freya's throat tightened. "She sounds extraordinary." "She was." Fenris finished the bandaging and sat back, his pale eyes distant. "They all were. My father was a good alpha, fair, strategic, respected. My mother held the pack together with wisdom and strength. My brother Kale was supposed to rule after my father. He was better suited for it than I was. Diplomatic. Patient." His jaw clenched. "I was the warrior. The enforcer. The one they sent to handle problems that couldn't be negotiated. And then they were gone," Freya said softly. "And you had to become everything they were. All at once." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something raw flickered in his eyes. "How do you understand that?" "Because when my mother died, I had to become someone I wasn't. Someone harder. Someone who could survive my father's cowardice and Victor's cruelty." She reached out, her newly bandaged hand hovering near his face. "We're both wearing armor made of grief." Fenris caught her hand, his large fingers wrapping around hers. For a moment, they just sat there, connected by touch and shared pain. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. And something shifted between them, something that had been building since that first night in the courtyard. "You're dangerous," Fenris said, his voice rough. "Not because of your information or your skills. Because you make me feel things I buried 7 years ago." Freya's breath caught. "What things?" "Hope. Warmth." His thumb traced circles on her palm. The spark of wanting something beyond vengeance. Her free hand moved of its own accord, reaching up to touch the scar that ran along his jaw. He inhaled sharply but didn't pull away. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips, and she could feel his pulse jumping. "I shouldn't want this," he murmured, his eyes locked on hers. "It's dangerous. Weakness. The moment you care about something, your enemies can use it against you." "Then we don't tell them," Freya whispered. Her wolf was screaming at her to close the distance, to claim this powerful male as hers. "We keep it hidden. A secret between us." Fenris leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. She could feel his breath on her lips, smell the pine and leather, and something uniquely him. "If I start this," he said, his voice barely above a growl, "I won't be able to stop. My wolf has been circling you for weeks. Getting closer. Claiming you in ways you probably haven't even noticed." "I've noticed," Freya admitted. "And my wolf has been circling back." The space between them evaporated. His lips were a breath away from hers, and Freya's entire world narrowed to this moment, this male, this. A knock on the inner door shattered the tension. "My king," Bjorn's voice called through the wood. "The storm's getting worse." Lyra spotted movement in the trees. Could be more rogues seeking shelter. Fenris pulled back, his expression shifting instantly from vulnerable to commanding. "Secure the windows. I'll check the perimeter." He stood, all business again, the moment broken. But as he moved toward the door, he paused and looked back at her. "When this storm passes," he said quietly, "we finish this conversation." Then he was gone, leaving Freya alone with her racing heart and the phantom feeling of his almost kiss burning on her lips. They made it back to Stormhall Keep the next morning, frozen and exhausted but alive. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in white silence. Freya went straight to her tower room, desperate for a bath and clean clothes. Astrid brought hot water and helped her wash away the journey's grime, all while chattering about supply reports and border patrols. It wasn't until Astrid left that Freya noticed something wrong. The room felt off. Nothing obvious. Nothing she could name. Just a subtle wrongness that made her wolf growl in warning. She moved carefully toward her bed, where her dagger lay on the furs. She'd left it there this morning, hadn't she? Or had she put it on the table? The attack came from behind the wardrobe. A male lunged at her, blade glinting in the firelight. Freya threw herself sideways, her hand closing around her dagger. The assassin was fast, professionally trained, she realized with horror. Not a rogue or random attacker. This was someone Victor had sent. "Nothing personal, love," the assassin said, his accent southern shadow pack. "But the Alpha wants his property back. Dead or alive, doesn't matter to him anymore." He struck again, and Freya barely parried. Her training with Astrid kicked in, dodge, counter, create distance. But he was bigger, stronger, and clearly experienced at killing. She screamed. Not from fear, but strategy. "Let them know. Let someone come." The assassin's blade sliced across her shoulder, and pain exploded through her. Blood soaked through her tunic. He was positioning for a kill strike when the door exploded inward. Fenris didn't bother with human form. His shift was instantaneous and brutal, bones cracking, muscles expanding, his massive wolf form erupting into the room like a force of nature. And his eyes. Ancestors help her, his eyes were pure feral white. No recognition. No control. Just primal, absolute rage. The assassin barely had time to turn before Fenris was on him. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. Fenris tore into the assassin with savage efficiency, his jaws clamping around the male's throat and ripping. Blood sprayed across the stone walls. The assassin tried to shift, tried to fight back, but Fenris was beyond reason. He tore the male apart piece by piece, snarls echoing through the tower like thunder. Freya pressed herself against the wall, her hand clamped over her bleeding shoulder. She'd seen violence before, had witnessed Victor's cruelty. But this was different. This was pure, uncontrolled fury. This was what happened when you threatened something an alpha had claimed. When the assassin finally stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being anything but scattered parts, Fenris didn't stop. He continued to savage the body, lost completely to his beast. Fenris. Ragnar appeared in the doorway, Bjorn and Astrid behind him. Their faces went pale. "My king, he's dead. He's dead." But Fenris couldn't hear them. His wolf had taken over completely, and Freya realized with cold clarity that this was the danger everyone whispered about. The Ice King who'd lost his entire family. The Alpha who'd spent 7 years hunting assassins. His control was absolute until something threatened what was his. And somehow, without either of them meaning for it to happen, she'd become his. Everyone out, Freya commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. No. Ragnar started to protest, but Astrid grabbed his arm. She's right. If he sees us as threats right now. They backed out, closing the broken door as much as they could, leaving Freya alone with a feral alpha and a corpse. She should have been terrified. Any sane wolf would be. But her wolf wasn't afraid. Her wolf recognized him, knew him. And more than that, her wolf wanted to soothe him. Fenris, she said softly, lowering herself to the ground, making herself smaller, less threatening. It's over. I'm safe. You saved me. The massive silver-gray wolf turned toward her, lips still pulled back in a snarl. His white eyes were wild, unseeing. Blood dripped from his muzzle. Look at me, Freya continued, her voice gentle but firm. Really look. It's me. Freya. You're yours. Something flickered in those white eyes. A hint of pale gray breaking through. She extended one hand, palm up. An offering. A show of trust that could get her killed if he was too far gone. Come back to me. Please. I need you here. Not lost in rage. Fenris took one step toward her. Then another. His massive form was trembling, fighting between feral instinct and returning consciousness. When he was close enough, Freya slowly reached up and placed her hand on his blood-soaked muzzle. There you are, she whispered. There's my Alpha King. The shift back was slower this time, almost painful to watch. His wolf form reluctantly giving way to human. When it was done, Fenris knelt before her, naked and covered in blood, his eyes fully gray again but haunted. I couldn't stop, he said, his voice wrecked. I felt you in pain through our ancestors, Freya. I couldn't stop. I wanted to keep killing him. Even after he was dead, I wanted. I know. She cupped his face with her uninjured hand. It's okay. I'm okay. You're bleeding. His eyes fixed on her shoulder wound, and a growl rumbled through his chest. He hurt you. In my keep. In your room. Where you should have been safe. But you saved me, Freya said firmly. That's what matters. Fenris looked at the carnage he'd created, and something broke in his expression. Do you understand what this means? I've imprinted on you. My wolf has claimed you as mine to protect. I can't. I won't be able to control this if you're threatened again. Then we make sure I'm not threatened again. You don't understand. He pulled away from her touch, standing and pacing like a caged animal. This is exactly what I swore would never happen. This is how they destroy you. They find what you love, and they use it as a weapon. Who says I'm what you love? Freya challenged, pushing herself to her feet despite the pain. Maybe you just hate Victor enough that you can't stand the thought of him winning. Fenris spun to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. Don't pretend you don't feel this too. I can smell it on you. Your wolf calls to mine. Has been calling since that first night. Then what are you afraid of? Freya demanded. That I'll be used against you? That Victor will hurt me to hurt you? He's already trying. That assassin proves it. I'm afraid, Fenris said, his voice dropping to something broken and honest, that I'll fail you. Like I failed them. That I'll be too late, too slow, and I'll find you torn apart like my sister. Like my mother. Like everyone I've ever tried to protect. The confession hung between them, raw and bleeding. Freya crossed the space between them, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. You didn't fail them. You were betrayed. Ambushed. That's not the same as failure. Tell that to the ghosts I live with. I would if I could. She grabbed his hand, forcing him to look at her. But I can tell you this, I'm not your sister. I'm not your mother. I'm a she-wolf who survived being sold, who escaped a forced mating, who killed to stay free. I don't need you to save me from everything. I need you to fight beside me. Fenris stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Beside you. As partners. As. She hesitated, then threw caution away. As mates. Real mates. Not forced. Not political. But chosen. You don't know what you're asking for, he said, but his hand tightened on hers. The mating bond is permanent. Unbreakable. If I claim you, there's no going back. Good, Freya said fiercely. Because I'm done running. I'm done being alone. And I'm done pretending I don't want this. Want you. For a heartbeat, Fenris just looked at her. Then he was kissing her, his hands tangling in her hair, and it was nothing like the gentle, almost kiss in the cabin. This was desperate and claiming and fierce. His wolf and hers rose to meet each other, recognizing, accepting, bonding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fenris rested his forehead against hers. If we do this, he said, his voice rough, you're mine. Completely. My mate. My queen. Mine to protect and mine to cherish. No half measures. If we do this, Freya countered, you're mine too. My mate. My king. Mine to stand beside and mine to fight for. Equal terms. A real smile broke across his face, not the dangerous almost smile, but something genuine and devastating. Equal terms, he agreed. Then his expression grew serious. But not here. Not in a room covered in blood. When I claim you properly, it will be done right. Romantic, Freya teased, though her wolf was howling with impatience. Practical, he corrected. He pulled her close, careful of her injury. First, we get that shoulder tended. Then we deal with the fact that Victor managed to get an assassin into my keep. Then, his eyes darkened with promise. Then I'm going to lock us in my chambers for 3 days and make you understand exactly what it means to be mated to the Ice King. Heat flooded through Freya's body. Is that a threat? It's a promise. He kissed her once more, softer this time. Now let me take care of you. The healer had just finished stitching Freya's shoulder when Astrid burst into the room, her face grim. We found how the assassin got in, she announced. There's a servant, one of the kitchen staff. Southern Shadow Pack sympathizer. He's been feeding Victor information and providing access. Fenris's expression went glacial. Where is he? Dungeon. Ragnar's guarding him personally. Good. Fenris stood, his lethal calm back in place. I'll deal with him shortly. But first, we need to discuss something. He turned to Freya, and his eyes were serious. You said you wanted to help destroy Victor. That you had information that could cripple him. Now I'm asking, is there anything, any single piece of intelligence that could destroy him completely? Strip away his power and legitimacy. Freya's mind raced through everything she'd observed, every conversation she'd overheard. Then something clicked. A drunken boast Victor had made one night, thinking she wasn't paying attention. The blood scroll, she said slowly. Victor claims descent from Alpha Thorn, founder of the Southern Shadow Pack. It's the source of his legitimacy. But I overheard him talking to his general about how the original scroll proving his lineage was creatively amended after his father killed the previous Alpha. Fenris went very still. He forged his claim to power. Not forged exactly. More like selectively edited. The real blood scroll exists somewhere. It proves the previous Alpha son was the legitimate heir, not Victor's line. If we could find it, we could destroy him legally, Fenris finished, a predatory smile spreading across his face. The Wolf Council would strip his title. He'd be nothing. An oathbreaker and a fraud. There's just one problem, Freya said. The scroll is in Victor's fortress. In his personal chambers, behind a hidden safe built into the wall behind the wolf head crest. I saw him access it once when he thought I was asleep. Then we need to get it. How? Your warriors can't just walk into his fortress. And I'm not exactly welcome there anymore. Fenris was quiet for a moment, his tactical mind clearly working through options. Then Freya realized something and her stomach dropped. My father, she said quietly. Grimhard Silvano. He's still in Victor's territory. Still part of that world. Victor trusts him because he delivered me once. Her voice turned bitter. He could get access. Your father sold you to Victor, Fenris said carefully. Why would he help us now? Because he loved my mother. And because Freya swallowed hard. Because maybe, just maybe, he regrets what he did. He tried to visit me twice during my engagement. Victor forbade it, but he tried. Maybe there's still something salvageable in him. That's a dangerous maybe. All of this is dangerous. Freya met his eyes. But if we want to destroy Victor without starting a full-scale war that kills hundreds of wolves, this is how we do it. We steal his legitimacy. We expose him. We let the council handle justice. Fenris studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. How do we contact your father? There's a trading post on the neutral border. Wolves from both territories use it. I can send a message through someone I trust, one of my mother's old friends. She'll make sure it reaches him. And if he refuses? Or worse, if he tells Victor. Freya's joy tightened. Then we find another way. But I have to try. Not just for us, but because if there's any chance my father's soul isn't completely lost. I need to know. 3 days later, they got a response. Freya stood in Fenris's private study, staring at the message that had been delivered by a neutral courier. Her father's handwriting, shaky but legible. I will help. Not for him. For her memory. Tell me what you need. Relief and old pain warred in her chest. Fenris stood behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders, a gesture that had become natural since they'd accepted their bond. He agreed, she said softly. Then we plan. Fenris turned her to face him. But know this, if it goes wrong, if your father is compromised, I will not hesitate to protect you. Even if it means leaving him to Victor's mercy. I know, Freya said. And I wouldn't ask you to do otherwise. They spent the next week planning every detail. Grimhard would attend the mating moon ceremony, a sacred gathering where all packs celebrated bonds under the full moon. Victor would be distracted, performing the ceremonial rites. Security would be focused outward on guests, not inward on residents. During the ceremony, Grimhard would claim illness and retire to his guest chambers. Instead, he'd slip into Victor's private wing, crack the safe using the combination Freya had memorized, and steal the blood scroll. Then he'd escape through the servant corridors to where Bjorn and a small strike team would be waiting at the forest edge. It was a simple plan, which meant 1,000 things could go wrong. The night of the mating moon, Freya stood in the war room with Fenris, staring at a map of Victor's fortress. They'd established a mental link through their growing mate bond, not complete yet, but strong enough to share emotions and vague impressions. He's inside. Bjorn's voice came through the communication crystal they'd enchanted. Grimhard just entered the fortress. He looks nervous, but steady. Freya's hands clenched on the table edge. Fenris moved behind her, his solid presence grounding her. We can still call this off, he murmured. Send in a strike team instead. No, this is the way. But her wolf was pacing, anxious. Time crawled. Fenris had positioned them in the forest a mile from Victor's border, close enough to support the extraction if needed, but far enough to avoid detection. The full moon hung overhead, huge and silver. Through the bond, Freya could feel Grimhard's fear as clearly as if it were her own. Her father was moving through the fortress, following the route she'd mapped out. Servants' corridors. Past the great hall where the ceremony blazed with torchlight and celebration. Up the spiral staircase to the Alpha's wing. He's at the chambers, Freya whispered, though no one had asked. She could feel it. He's inside. Fenris's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Grimhard was working the safe. Freya had made him practice the combination 100 times on a replica, but his hands were shaking. Once, twice, 3 times, and the safe opened. He's got it, Freya breathed. He has the scroll. But then her father's emotions shifted, fear spiking into terror. Someone's coming, Freya said urgently. Victor's returning to his chambers early. Fenris, someone tipped him off. Through the bond, she felt her father's panic. Victor's voice in the corridor, smelling an intruder. Grimhard had seconds to escape. He shoved the scroll into his shirt, dove for the window, and dropped 2 stories into the bushes below. Pain exploded through the bond, Grimheart's ankle twisting on impact. But he ran, limping, desperate. Victor's howl of rage echoed through the night. "Extraction now," Fenris commanded into the crystal. "Bjorn, he's coming in hot." They saw it happen, Grimheart bursting from the tree line, pursued by 3 of Victor's personal guard. Bjorn and his team intercepted, weapons flashing in the moonlight. A brief, brutal skirmish. Then they were running, Grimheart carried between 2 warriors. Victor himself appeared at the forest edge, shifted into his wolf form, a massive black beast with red-rimmed eyes. For a moment, Freya thought he'd pursue across the border. But even Victor wouldn't violate neutral territory during the mating moon. The Wolf Council would strip his title immediately. He held his rage into the night instead, a promise of violence to come. "Go," Fenris ordered his team. "Get back to the keep. Now." They ran through the forest, Freya's heart pounding until they were safely across the border into Stormhowl lands. Only then did Grimheart collapse, pulling the blood scroll from his shirt and pressing it into Freya's hands. "I'm sorry," he gasped, his face pale with pain and fear. "For everything. Your mother, she would never forgive what I did. But maybe this is a start." Freya looked at the scroll, then at her father, this broken wolf who'd sold her and now risked everything to help her. "It's a start," she agreed quietly. Fenris took the scroll, his eyes scanning the ancient text in the moonlight. His smile was cold and victorious. "This is it. Complete bloodline documentation. Victor's great-grandfather killed the legitimate heir and destroyed the records. This proves everything." "Then we have him," Freya said. "Then we destroy him," Fenris corrected. He looked at Grimheart. "You'll have sanctuary here. For what you've done tonight, you've earned it." Grimheart nodded, exhausted. "I don't deserve it. But I'll take it. For her memory." As they made their way back to Stormhowl Keep, Freya realized something had shifted. They weren't just surviving anymore. They weren't just planning. They were winning. And soon, very soon, Victor Hawthorne would know what it meant to lose everything. The Wolf Council convened within a fortnight. It was held on neutral ground, the ancient stone circle where pack law had been administered for 1,000 years. Massive pillars of carved granite stood in a perfect circle, open to the sky, with the sacred fire burning at its center. Representatives from every major pack in the realm attended, along with the 5 elder alphas who served as judges in matters of pack law and succession. Victor Hawthorne arrived with an entourage of 50 warriors, his arrogance on full display. He wore ceremonial armor, black and red, with his pack sigil emblazoned across the chest. When his eyes found Freya standing beside Fenris, his lip curled in a snarl. "So the whore found a new master," he called across the circle, his voice carrying. "Tell me, Stormhowl, is she as sweet as she looks? Or did you discover she's nothing but—" "Finish that sentence," Fenris interrupted, his voice deadly calm, "and I'll rip your tongue out before the council can stop me." The elder alphas, 3 males and 2 females, all ancient and powerful, exchanged glances. The eldest, a silver-haired female named Morrigan, stepped forward. "Alpha Stormhowl. Alpha Hawthorne. You were summoned here to address accusations of fraud and illegitimate succession. These are grave charges." "Charges brought by a traitor," Victor spat, his eyes finding Grimheart, who stood with the Stormhowl delegation, his healing ankle wrapped. "That coward sold his daughter to me, took my gold, and then conspired to rob me. Nothing he says can be trusted." "We're not here to discuss Grimheart Silvano's character," Fenris said, stepping into the circle. "We're here to discuss yours, Victor. Your legitimacy. Your right to rule the Southern Shadow Pack." He pulled the blood scroll from his cloak, holding it up for all to see. The ancient parchment was yellowed with age, sealed with wax and blood. Gasps rippled through the assembled wolves. "The blood scroll," Morrigan breathed. It was said to be destroyed. It was said to be destroyed because Victor's family wanted it destroyed, Fenris corrected. He handed the scroll to Morrigan. Read it, Elder. See for yourself the truth of his bloodline. Morrigan unrolled the scroll carefully, her eyes scanning the ancient text. The other elders gathered around her, reading over her shoulders. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Finally, Morrigan looked up, her expression grave. This scroll documents the complete bloodline of the Southern Shadow Pack from its founding. According to this, Alpha Thorn's legitimate heir was his eldest son, Rowan Shadowfang. But Rowan was murdered 3 days before his ascension ceremony. Her eyes fixed on Victor. Murdered by Marcus Hawthorne, your great-grandfather, who then seized power and claimed the title for himself. The circle erupted in shocked murmurs. Victor's face went white, then red with rage. That's a forgery, he roared. Storhall fabricated it to discredit me. The scroll is authenticated. Another elder, a grizzled male named Garrett, said quietly. It bears the mark of the Moon Priestess, sealed in her blood. Such marks cannot be forged. He looked at Victor with something like pity. Your entire line has ruled on a lie, Alpha Hawthorne. You are not the legitimate heir to the Southern Shadow Pack. I am the Alpha. Victor's voice cracked with fury. I've ruled for 12 years. My father before me, his father before him. We built that pack into what it is. You built it on blood and deception, Freya said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to her. You murdered your way to power, just like your great-grandfather. You forced matings, silenced dissent, and assassinated anyone who questioned your authority. Her voice strengthened. Including hiring the assassins who slaughtered Alpha Stormhall's family 7 years ago. Victor's eyes went wide for just a moment, confirmation of guilt. Then he laughed, harsh and bitter. You think you can prove that? You have no evidence. Actually, Fenris said, pulling out a second document, we do. Your servant, the one who helped the assassin infiltrate my keep, was very eager to talk once we explained his options. He provided detailed testimony about your involvement in the Blood Moon massacre, including payments made, names of assassins hired, and your personal orders to leave no survivors. Victor's face went from red to ashen. Around the circle, the assembled alphas were growling, their eyes flashing with outrage. The Blood Moon massacre had shocked the entire realm. To know it had been orchestrated by a fellow alpha. The penalty for murdering another alpha's family is death, Morrigan said, her voice like iron. The penalty for fraudulent succession is exile and stripping of title. Victor Hawthorne, you stand accused of both. How do you answer? Victor looked around the circle, seeing no allies, no escape. His warriors were outnumbered 3-1 by the combined forces present. He was trapped, his lies exposed, his crimes laid bare. But Victor Hawthorne was many things: a murderer, a tyrant, a fraud, but he was not a coward. I invoke the right of challenge, he said, his voice ringing clear. Single combat. If Stormhall wants justice for his family, let him take it from me himself. Winner takes all, legitimacy, territory, and the female. I'm not property to be wagered, Freya snarled. You're not, Fenris agreed, his hand finding hers and squeezing. He looked at the elders. I accept his challenge. But we fight for justice, not for ownership. Freya is my mate by choice, not by conquest. Morrigan nodded slowly. The challenge is accepted. Combat will be to the death. Shift or remain human, combatant's choice. The victor will be recognized by the council. She paused. May the moon goddess guide the worthy. The circle cleared, wolves backing away to create an arena. Victor stripped off his armor, cracking his neck, a feral grin on his face. He'd killed 17 wolves in challenge matches throughout his reign. He was vicious, experienced, and brutal. Fenris removed his cloak calmly, handing it to Ragnar. He rolled his shoulders, and Freya could feel through their bond the cold focus settling over him. This wasn't the feral rage from the assassin attack. This was controlled, precise violence. The Ice King at his most dangerous. When I kill you, Victor called across the circle, "I'm going to mount your head on my fortress gate. And then I'm going to find that little whore and show her what happens to females who betray their betters." Fenris didn't respond. He simply shifted. His wolf form was magnificent, massive silver gray with winter white markings, easily larger than Victor's black beast. But it was his eyes that made wolves step back. Not feral white this time. Morrigan stepped forward, her expression stern. "Victor Hellthorn, you are hereby stripped of your title and authority. The Southern Shadow Pack will be placed under council supervision until a legitimate heir can be identified and installed." She turned to Fenris. "Alpha Storm Howl, the council recognizes your victory and your justice. The crimes against your family have been answered." Fenris stood there, blood-covered and victorious, and looked around the circle. Every alpha present, every warrior, every wolf was watching him, waiting to see what the Ice King would do. He walked across the circle to Freya, ignoring everyone else. When he reached her, he pulled her against him, heedless of the blood, and kissed her deeply, claiming her in front of the entire realm, making it clear that she was his mate, his equal, his choice. When they broke apart, Freya saw something she'd been waiting weeks to see. Fenris Storm Howl was smiling. Not a ghost of amusement. Not a dangerous smirk. A real, genuine smile that transformed his brutal, beautiful face into something that made her breath catch. Joy. Relief. Peace. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. 7 years. And it's finally over. "No," Freya corrected, smiling back at him. "It's finally beginning." Morrigan cleared her throat delicately. "Alpha Storm Owl, there is one more matter to address." Fenris turned, keeping Freya tucked against his side. "Elder, you have united the North and proven yourself both warrior and leader. You have exposed corruption and upheld pack law." She gestured to the assembled alphas. "The council would like to propose that you take formal rulership of the Southern Shadow Pack territories in addition to your own. Unite the North and South under one banner. One rule." Murmurs of approval rippled through the circle. Even wolves from other packs nodded clearly. This had been discussed before the council convened. Fenris looked down at Freya. "What do you think, little wolf? Should we rule an empire?" "I think," Freya said slowly, "that we should build something better than an empire. Something fair. Where females aren't property and where legitimacy matters more than violence." She looked at Morrigan. "We accept. On the condition that we reform the old laws. Make them just." Morrigan's lips quirked in something that might have been approval. "A wise queen indeed." She raised her voice. "Then by the power vested in the Wolf Council, we crown you Alpha King Fenris Storm Howl, ruler of the Northern Lands and the Southern Territories. And we recognize Freya Silverpaw as your queen and mate, equal in authority and wisdom." Ragnar stepped forward with a ceremonial crown, ancient silver worked with wolf motifs. He placed it on Fenris's head, then bowed deeply. "My king." Astrid brought a matching crown for Freya, smaller but no less intricate. As it settled on her head, Freya felt the weight of it. Not just metal, but responsibility. Purpose. She'd run from a forced mating in a blood-stained dress, barefoot and desperate. Now she stood as queen, crowned before the entire realm, mated to the most powerful alpha alive. Sometimes, Freya thought, the best revenge was survival. And thriving. Victor was dragged away by council guards, his howls of protest fading into the distance. Grim Ard approached slowly, limping on his healing ankle. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly to Freya. "But I'm proud. Your mother would be proud. Of the wolf you've become." Freya looked at her father, this broken, regretful male who'd helped save her in the end. "It's not forgiveness," she said. "Not yet. But maybe someday it could be." He nodded, understanding, and stepped back into the crowd. As the council ceremony concluded and the assembled wolves began to celebrate, Fenris pulled Freya close once more. "Ready to rule an empire, my queen?" Ready to change one, my king, she corrected. He laughed, a sound she was going to make sure she heard much more often, and kissed her again. Around them, wolves howled their approval, the sound echoing across the stone circle and into the forests beyond. 7 years ago, Fenris Store Howl had stopped smiling. Tonight, surrounded by his mate, his people, and his hard-won justice, he couldn't stop smiling. And in the years to come, when wolves told the story of the Ice King and his Silver Queen, they would always begin the same way. They say he never smiled. Until a girl in a bloody wedding dress changed everything. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going.